Welcome everybody. So excited for a final session of the transforming teaching for the new normal, whatever we're calling it these days, for the fall. I just want to say a couple of quick things before everybody introduces themselves and we get into it. First of all, I want to start with a land acknowledgement. I come to you today from the unceded lands of the Hachiman and the Tongva here in Southern California. And I'm mindful of their history and their continued work to protect these lands. And I'm appreciative to be in community with you all, knowing that much of your work goes to serve this same goal as well. And I just want to thank everyone and acknowledge everyone again. I know kind of this new normal thing has become a hot topic and people are getting into it, but it's really, really important to acknowledge that most, if not all of you have been working on this for a really, really, really long time. And that COVID has kind of brought to light some inequities or exacerbated inequities that we have seen already and have been working towards addressing, and has brought us together. But I really want to acknowledge that in the room, there's decades and decades of work that has been done in really, really meaningful ways that has enacted change. And I hope folks who are here and folks who ultimately will watch this will kind of take that away also, that when we go back in the fall, we do have an opportunity to really reimagine and change some things. But I hope that we can think about this as a much longer term pursuit that we will commit ourselves to. And with that, I think everybody knows everybody, but why don't we just take a second for everyone to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started with the conversation. And if you want to look at the chat, let's just go down the chat and go in the participant order, and we'll just go down in that order. Anne-Marie, you're first.
Oh, sorry. I think it puts my name at the top when it's myself.
Yeah, I think the order is different for different people.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. That's okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Ngo. I go by she, her pronouns. I'm a current student teacher right now in the CalTeach program, about to graduate, which is so exciting. And about to become a first-year teacher teaching the Living Earth in Irvine Unified School District. So I'm excited to be here and to learn with you all.
I'm sorry, for some reason I can't see the chat. Am I next?
You are now.
I think I'm signed in twice for some reason. Wanda Bryant. I've been retired almost 1 year now from Detroit Public Schools Community District. But I've been doing like some curriculum review work, which I enjoy. Taking care of my grandkids. Enjoying life.
So I don't know who goes next, but I'll go ahead and go. My name is Kay Renee Pullen. I am an elementary science specialist in Caddo Parish and that's in Shreveport, Louisiana. So I'm really excited to be here and to end my day with you all.
I'll go. I'm Elise Sisley. I'm in, our school year ended on Friday, but I'm in Capistrano Unified as the elementary curriculum specialist. And actually that job ended. They decided to just eliminate all curriculum specialists. So I can return to the classroom, and I love the classroom. I worked as a curriculum specialist for 2 years, went back to the classroom for years, came back out for 4 years. But I'm also, just kind of open to different things because this work is so important right now. It's like such bad timing to eliminate science specialists, right? So I really appreciate this group and the broad perspective you all bring, especially from all over the country. I really have loved that.
Nice. I'm Johanna Brown. I'm up here on the border between Idaho and Washington, and I teach computer science and chemistry for Pullman Public Schools.
I can go. I'm Jennifer Bartlow, and I teach in IUSD. Actually, I'm close to UCI, and it's going to be my 8th year. And I teach AP Environmental Science, and I teach bio, and I enjoy it, and I'm always trying to get better. So that's that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Anderson, and I used to be a high school teacher, but now I mostly hang in elementary school. I was elementary methods professor, and now I'm doing research in 5th grade science because I really think elementary is really where the most need is. So I'm very committed to working in elementary, and I'm going to get to teach 5th grade this year, and I'm so excited. I'm only going to be the science teacher. I won't teach all their subjects, but I'll be their science teacher. So I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you all. I have some questions down, but I also want to make this as open, as free-flowing as possible, because I know you have a lot of thoughts. So I just want to open with one question in particular, and then we can see where it goes. And I know there has been a lot of very deficit-laden language around what has gone on this year and what has happened this year. And certainly there's been a lot of tragedy and a lot of things that have happened. But I think we have not done enough to recognize the brilliance of educators and students, and amazing things that have been done this year, and ways that both educators and students and families have really shown. So if you could take a minute and think about 1 or 2 things that you have done. And again, I know we had kind of specific topics around ungrading, place-based literacy, etc. But what are 1 or 2 things that went really, really well this year that were just amazing, that are important to share, and also think, as folks are thinking about this and watching this, that we want to make sure that we carry on into next year instead of forgetting. And we can go in any order that you all would like.
I'll go ahead and get us started because I was thinking about this like right before we started. And one of the things that we did, we stayed open. So we were in person for the whole year. We went through some, growing pains, had some different schedules, especially with high school and middle school that switched. And but for the most, and we did have some times that we had to close down because of quarantines and things like that. But for the most part, we kept to the plan, kept to the, enough kids were virtual, so social distancing was actually able to happen. They masked. And so I didn't think we could do, but we did. But the biggest thing I was excited about is our parents commented that they liked how much we communicated, and they, both on a district level and on a school level. And so that's one thing that I'm hoping, before we take it to the next level, I'm hoping that at some point we find out exactly what it is about the communication that we did that was successful, so we can do that. Because I've heard some conversations and I'm starting to get leery that maybe we think one thing, but then the families might think something else. And so I think it's really important for us to find out exactly what the parents liked about that communication and how we did that. I do know there was a lot of partnerships with media, with social, a lot of push with social media on all ends, just with the information constantly, and partnering with our nonprofits around the place. So I don't know exactly what it is, but hopefully we'll get our pin on it and we can keep doing those things. And so that's one of the things I was really thinking about that I was not thinking would be, and something that would be a big plus for us, but that, because we're not good at it. You're not good at the communication, but that has been a plus. Oh, this is recording. I shouldn't say that. We're great at Cato.
Yeah, I'd say my big takeaway is kind of related to what Renee said. I think that having all these flexible means of communicating has allowed people to kind of prioritize their home life and more easily, because you can attend a meeting virtually, or, your parent teacher conference might be on Zoom instead of you having to go there. And so I think there's more ways to accommodate people with all the things they have going on in their life. And I hope that that continues after COVID.
I think for me, being freed from standards, even though we like the standards, but being freed to just teach what I felt was essential by my district. And I think also having administrators being freed from having to do this instructional march and having administrators doing home visits and really just worrying about taking care of teachers and students. And then me just trying different projects, really investing in doing way better with relevant topics for students, and just not having the pressure of I have to get these things in. I learned so much, and I think students learned more than they would have if I would have tried to keep on that same schedule. So trying out project-based learning in big scales, I think just was awesome. And it proved to me, I think we're just so scared. That's why people are scared to ungrade. They're scared to go project-based learning. They're scared to be phenomena-driven because they just don't know if it will work. And so I think proving to myself that all of this stuff worked was really healthy.
Yeah, I love how you brought that up. Something that I feel like I definitely learned was a lot about, I feel like my entire workshop was about culturally responsive phenomena. And one of the things that I taught this year was kind of moving into like that criticality portion and back into that like social justice portion of who is getting the COVID-19 vaccine, who has access to it and who doesn't. And I have found that through doing a lesson about that, I had students come to my office hours who were like, oh my gosh, Miss No, like I normally don't unmute, but in my English class, we had a debate and I actually wanted to share what I learned in bio. And I have learned so much about like how much that matters, that it is relevant to them, not just because we say it's relevant, but because we kind of see the impact that it really has. Outside of that, something that I'm learning a lot about that I think we definitely need to continue is how much we focus on, number one, social emotional learning, and how often we ask for student feedback. I was in education the other day and my teacher literally asked, when you were in high school, how many of your teachers asked you for feedback? And I literally was like, none of them asked me for any feedback. And I think that's something that's really important that I'm learning, like going into this next year, I need to always see like, is this working for you? Do you like what you're learning? Does it matter to you? Is it relevant? And how can we keep doing that so that you want to engage and you want to participate in class? So that's something that I'm thinking a lot about.
I was thinking that I think the inequities are so highlighted right now, right? And not just at schools, but in the national arena, right? And it's a scary political time, and I think if we can just be equity warriors in all that we do, today a reporter asked me, why is STEM education important? And I'm like, how will we solve the global problems of the world? And artists need STEM skills and everything. And I think people forget about that. And, I'm a first gen student myself. My mom would have never been able to take me to a science night ever, right? With her 4 kids and single mom. And so doing these virtual nights, I loved seeing families like, parents with little ones on their hip making pasta while their kid was like in the Zoom meeting making a parachute with me, or, and also getting community partners to participate in family science nights where maybe they wouldn't have if they had to schlep all their stuff to school. So I would, I feel like I've been trying to tell every principal I know, please plan a virtual STEAM night next year. It's just more equitable. And I think if we can just focus on that in all of our work, And like you've all said about project being authentic and, you know, attending to SEL and stuff, then I think it's going to really help kids.
Well, since I've been out of the classroom for just about a year, my focus has been on, wow, I wish I had known this when I was still in the classroom, so I could have tried it out. So that's what I've been busy doing, learning.
Wanda, what's one thing that you learned that you wished you would have known?
I wish I would have tried out adding ELA text sets to NGSS units to help with the reading, ongoing reading problem that we have. It might be a solution.
Jennifer, anything you want to share?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess I liked that when we went hybrid, not all online, we finally figured out, you know, what was most important. And I think going into planning, moving forward and trying to get better, I think we know what we want to make sure to do. So it'll be easier to kind of, I don't know, just to plan better and not overwhelm students. And then after the feedback comment was mentioned, it made me think I was so scared to do the feedback thing this year, but every time they did FRQs, I had them do feedback even on like how well they worked in the breakout rooms in groups. So like actually their role, like, did you ask for help when you needed it? Did you offer help when it was needed by others? Like, who were you in the group? But also with like the whole, you know, just having 1 day a week of activities, I think back of like 5 years ago, asking the same questions and had students say, stop doing pointless activities like blank. And so I've modified so much. And then I have them do this reflection activity, the final assignment in my environmental science, choose 10 images from this class that represent this class, and then explain why. And then when they come to class, they all get in groups. And I actually did, I think I might have learned it here. It was like a little, no, it was something like this. It had like the little diamond in the middle and then the 4 parts. And so then students fill in like, what was unique about your memories from the class? And then what do you all share from the class? And I couldn't believe it, but that activity that 5 years ago, these kids were like, stop doing pointless activities like blank. What I learned is it matters so much how you introduce the activity and like how you frame it and what you know, just every piece about it. I even made it more of a competition, and the kids like, you know, it's like, which is something I normally don't do because but because it was like silly cookie mining activity, but it serves so many purposes for what I'm trying to teach. It was just so funny to think like, oh, you're saying this was the greatest, and 5 years ago they hated this, or at least a handful of them did, just because I changed how I presented it. And I actually told the kids that too. I said, I am so happy I'm seeing this. You wouldn't believe 5 years ago. I'm like, it was kind of fun. So I was glad you said the feedback thing, because I would have forgotten to share that otherwise.
Thanks, Jennifer. I just want to capture some of the things that you all brought up, and we can talk about them, but I also want to make sure that there's space for you to talk about anything that you want to. But it seems like there was really something about being given an opportunity to critically think about what's most important and potentially thin out some of these things, right? And in the context of standards or anything else, but what's really, really important. And I think part of that is also this notion of trying, which I think a lot of people are talking about, that you brought up, Johanna, about the pandemic kind of gave us an opportunity to try. I think sadly, as a collective, education failed to try things as much as we could have. But I think it raises questions about how do we position educators to, I don't even know if it's courage. I don't even know what the right word for that is, because, you know, we're in such a system that sometimes is very confined and very oppressive. But, you know, how do we try these things that we know or think will work? And I think the other 2 points that you all brought up kind of centered around this listening. It seems like even though we were farther away, in many ways, folks tried to listen more, especially to students and families. And how do we not lose that? And then how do we use some of these technology tools to maintain access where, hey, Zoom is okay after a while. And if it means a parent doesn't have to lug, a bunch of kids and drive an hour, half an hour somewhere, that's going to create more access. So those seemed to be kind of these really important themes. What's really important? How do we get ourselves to a place where we can try things? And how can we continue to listen intently and maintain the access that was afforded with some of the remote? So go ahead, Lori. It looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, kind of building off of what Johanna said and, and Jennifer and Anne Marie about, I think it's really time to kind of do, I don't know, in the Navy, we called it like a bottom blowdown, of the curriculum. Like, what's the stuff that can just go? What's the stuff we've been carrying around forever because we've always taught it? And it's still in the NGSS because somebody on the committee didn't want to let it go. But, how can we make it more relevant? And, can we just start from scratch? I don't know. The bottom blowdown thing is like about cleaning out a steam generator. You blow the sludge out the bottom anyway.
I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I feel like for me as like a new teacher, I'm like, I want to overhaul everything, right? And start from scratch. And something that I've been thinking about being around, obviously, other veteran teachers is this idea. I think Dorian kind of brought it up in the beginning of this like deficit thinking of, oh, students are going to come back to the classroom and they will have been behind because they didn't learn this, and this from the standards that they were supposed to learn. So I don't really know what to say about that. I guess it's more of a question of how do you respond to that? And how do you make sure that we are moving away from that to understand that they're learning, number one, a lot of other things like dealing with the trauma from this, but also that we need to meet them where they are now, not be like, oh, well, they didn't learn this standard.
Yeah.
So how would you respond?
I mean, and some of it is like how much of our learning is getting kids to use a bunch of algorithms and do a bunch of things, when in real life, when you have a need to figure something out, you learn what you need to do it. It's like you don't carry this encyclopedia in your head and just whip it out, because 5 years from now, I'm not going to remember that thing anyway that you taught me. I'm going to have to relearn it. So I think we could do a lot of rethinking there. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but sometimes I look at stuff that's in there and I'm like, why is it in there? Oh, that's in there because we've always taught that and somebody just doesn't want to let it go.
Just for example, I do a spring meeting with AP chemistry before the next year because I just like to prep them and make sure everybody feels good because it's one of our tougher classes. And I always ask them questions, and every year I ask what makes them curious about things, and then what do they tend to struggle with. And the student answers for what they struggle with. And normally in AP chemistry, it's the students who are really pushing themselves at our school. And they say, oh, not a lot. I'm great. I get all A's are the answers I see. And this year, the vulnerability and the ways that they were talking about themselves and their learning just blew me away. I was like, oh my, we're ready to go. Like, we're going to learn so much. You are ready to do this. So I think what Lori said, just that's the important stuff, the skills, being able to just overcome a challenge when they're confronted with it is what's going to take them far.
Yeah, we really, it's like, and I know I read it, and I'm not the one to invent this, but this whole idea of learning how to learn, and I forget who was the first person to say that, but that's really what you want to teach kids is how can you figure something out that you want to know? And then you can apply those skills to many different areas. Do you really have to know how to like factor a trinomial or, all these other things that we teach kids? And I don't know.
But I do think it's a fair point that at this point next year, there is anxiety that we're going to start this year with. And it's, I mean, I'm not going to say it's fair because it isn't, but it's as if we are starting a race that has a much longer distance, but the same amount of time. And they want the kids to catch up and do all these things, which it's just impossible and it's unfair. It's unfair to everybody. And so one of the things that I know that is the mission that we're trying to do. I'm looking at the office over there. That's the 612 version of me, is her office. But we really want to kind of, with the materials that we have in our standards, we really want to do a little bit better job of having like a study of what it is that we're teaching. What is it that the students, and looking at our learning progressions so teachers can make decisions in the classroom of, okay, so this is what's important. This is something that our kids are going to be into that we know from the past. These are the things that we want them to really value. And when it comes to the assessment, I mean, like, honestly, we're going to do what we do. And I cannot be any more worried about that. I'm just really hoping that our teachers use those resources, consider, where they are, and based on those progressions from the standards about where they should be, and then make some executive decisions. And I think that's fair. Like, I don't want anything else on them. And I'm hoping that can go, especially since my time is being eroded for science in elementary. Maybe I can get support. We'll see about that.
I think that's what we're asking teachers to make some really tough judgment calls there, because you look at all those progressions and how do you decide which ones are the most important? I mean, all of those things look important. It really comes down to, I mean, cultural kind of values determine importance. Like if I'm going to live in Polynesian culture, I better know how to navigate. So I better know about some celestial stuff and how to find myself. But if I live in New York City, probably not so much.
And the truth is, I'm okay with all of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just think it's hard because when you start looking at it and then it's like, well, what do I take out here that's going to be a building block they need later? And, even though we say the NGSS has been like, they've tried to make it not a mile wide and an inch deep, is still a lot.
And I guess one of my questions that you all keep bringing up is, how do you get yourself, or what would you say? You've all been there. And what I mean by that, you've all taken these leaps multiple times of, I've thought about this really hard. I'm not just pulling it out of thin air. This is something that we know is going to work, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because it's the right thing to do, right? It may not be the thing that we're doing right now, but it's the right thing to do. And again, I know you've all done that in different ways. And I wonder if you can share a little bit of what it was for you, that was it, what conditions, what your state of mind, how did you get to the place where you're like, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. And then, of course, we know that the outcomes are going to be positive and then people may take it up or not. But this tension that Karen, both you and Lori just described, I think is something that a lot of teachers are going to feel. And I think, again, in the fall, we're going to have an opportunity because in some ways, similarly to COVID, people aren't going to know exactly what to do. And I don't think we're going to have it figured out over the summer. So if you do something that's kind of perceived as really goofy, they're going to give you some slack because everybody's going to be running around making sure that we're, doing what we're just keeping the boat afloat. So, how do we help teachers get there?
Well, I can say from my own experience, I was trained, a bajillion years ago, I was trained like in the Madeline Hunter tradition, right? How many people learned from Madeline back in their teaching? You do an anticipatory set, you do guided practice, independent practice, blah, 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 right? Not good teaching method, right? But, you could go through a book. But then when I went to a research-based workshop and they started showing how students who had been in physics, I was teaching physics, how they did on these conceptual-based tests after they had been through things. And these kids didn't understand anything. They could crank out a formula and calculate something, but they couldn't understand conceptually what was happening. For me, that was the thing that said, why am I wasting my time doing all this stuff if they're not getting it, they're not retaining it, they can't use it, right? And that's when I really became what they now call the radical constructivist. You know, we got to construct everything because, you know, you got to understand it to be able to use it. But that was definitely a mindset shift, because I had people afterwards telling me, well, you're spending all this time to cover, you know, you're not covering as much content because you're spending all this time. And I'm like, yeah, but look at what my students can do and look at what they understand.
What was the question? If you could repeat it. I was like,
Sorry.
okay, goes like, what is saying?
I am terrible at asking questions because I process as I speak. You all have done incredible things and have, as Lori just pointed out, you know, done things that appear to be radical that really I would rather we didn't call radical, but humanizing and what we ought to do. And Karen, like you raised, for example, this point, right, that into next year, there are going to be these tensions, and Johanna in the chat really, you know, expanded and added to that. But how do we help teachers to do those things that they know are right, that move them away from these systems that we've been steeped in, as Lori brought up, that we know are total trash and don't work, right? But we keep doing them because, as Johanna pointed out, sometimes those are the expectations or the particular interpretations of standards and other things, right? And you all have done this and have moved in a place where a person sitting next to you may not have moved. And I'm wondering what ideas you all might have for someone, you know, who might watch this of, you know, where do you get to a place? How do you get yourself to a place where you're going to try those things? And I also appreciate looking at the chat, all these points about moving against deficit perspectives and how really the everyday business that we're doing is very, very deficit laden. And we have an obligation to move away from that. So how do we get our minds to a place where we can do that?
I would say if you have evidence to support your claim of why you're being subversive, then you'll be good to go. If I try something new and I have evidence to back up what I did, then usually I had no problem with my administration. So, and just to add to that, I'm kind of getting like some pushback on even like the reading. We just tried to get away from all that reading, let them do the labs. And I understand that that's important, but in my environment with the students being so many grade levels behind, I had to do something as a teacher. So they had to be able, well, not at the young age, but for the explanations that's required on some of these tests. The students can't read it. How are they going to write about it? There's the reading writing connection. So I would not be doing my due diligence if I did not help my students with the reading.
Sometimes I think like one of my favorite times is when I got to train a bunch of principals, you know, so that they could experience what assets they brought to the experience, right? To the science inquiry-based experience. But definitely in our district, we have what I call a deficit mindset, you know, where now there's going to be an MTSS coach at every school. And then I'll say, but you know, that school has 266 out of 280 students at intensive on DIBELS. That means they're not getting great first instruction. They can't all be in the deficit zone, you know? So I think you know, like for me, I always feel like Mary Poppins, right? I have this bag of tricks. I was by nature a constructivist because I majored in cognitive psychology and biology at UCSD. So I had that like socialization, but I realized that's weird in the elementary space. So I believe that if I can do PD and have teachers experience what it's like to bring some assets to the table and I honor that, then that's my in usually, right? And then they'll try something with their own scholars and that will really help. But when you get a lead learner principal who's like open-minded, and it's like so exciting because it seems so rare in our district right now.
I would say for me, one of the things I really want to work on is working with my leaders so that they can better support the teachers. Because it's just, the decision making has to happen. And I have to support them and show leaders ways how they can support teachers to look at their materials and use their materials wisely with the supports that's given to them. But also that they can, alleviate some of the stress that is put upon the teachers so we can focus on the right things for our kids. And we can think about the students and the experiences that they're bringing in the classroom. How can we leverage that? How can we remove? I want to focus on decentering whiteness a lot in the art and our science stuff that we're doing this year. Even though that's a difficult conversation to have, but I want to talk about how can we center students science that looks like the people in our classroom. And so I think that's a better way to approach it and to have those conversations. But I have to get to my leaders. My teachers will not have a stress-free year if they have leaders who are just bringing their own anxiety. They have drama they have to deal with. They have to think about those assessments that are happening at the end of the year. Their names are going to be the one in the newspapers. And so, no, they haven't. But I mean, if we just center the kids science about the kids who live in that, if they look like them, that's not CRT, is it?
Yeah, and I'm as a department chair wishing that I had some sort of science specialist to talk to about things in my small school district.
You can always come to Louisiana.
I like the heat. I like the humidity. Where was I going with this? Oh, I'm just thinking about being an evangelist for the good that can happen. And at least for me, I was always interested in changing how I assess students. And I just needed someone enough like me to be able to believe that it was possible. Like I would read about some English teachers, which I don't want to put down at all, but I just felt like that's totally different than teaching chemistry. And they would say, oh, students are doing all this great work in English. And I'd say, that's English. And I just needed people in STEM to tell me that they had done these things and it was great. And I just needed enough people and to have that trust. I needed people that I trusted to tell me that. So I hope I tell teachers here all the time, they won't present, they won't share what they're doing because they don't think it's special. And it's like, I need everyone to tell about all the good things they're doing and share them so we can see that it doesn't take a magical teacher to do amazing work and to change people's lives in STEM. So I just want to hear more stories about teachers being successful.
Well, I think one of the big, systemic challenges we have is if you work in a district where the assessment is the gold standard and everything is, live or die by your assessment scores, if we can get away from that, we can move more towards, valuing other outcomes that are more important. But I think that is definitely a local culture kind of thing. Is your school going to choose that or not?
And I can tell you, Lori, that from what I've seen in the last couple of months with our teachers being hired, that one of the ways inequities are going to be perpetuated worse going forward than they were now is the distinction is very clear now between districts and schools that do that. And the students who are savvy and are going to want to do the things that we're talking about are going to work in the districts that look a lot like the ones that you describe. And sadly, most of those districts are not going to be the districts with the underserved students. And to me, that's kind of like, as a teacher educator this year, it's been like super apparent and super obvious. And I think it's kind of, I think it's really unfortunate.
May I ask a question about technology really quickly? I know in the beginning we spent, I think, a significant amount, not a significant, but too much time on trying to police the tech by putting things on it. And so it was interesting when teachers started using them a little, like we're learning better how to manage the tech that we use so that we're not having to block everything where, you know, you can't go to NASA, you can't go to YouTube, you can't, the things that teachers are using, even Netflix. And so I think that's something that we're still needing to think about, is that kids know how to use it. They could be useful, very useful in class. And, but we also don't need to police all of that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're policing them the 7 hours a day they're in school, when they're off school time, you know that they're all over the internet.
And I think that was one of the reasons why they were doing that, was that, and I felt like that's like, we should, that's not where our focus should be. Maybe we could give teachers some better tools on what they could do in the classroom so that we're not having kids drifting off and playing on other things that they're not supposed to. But that's something those are some conclusions that we drew during our experience.
And Karen, I think it's important to mention with that also the carceral pedagogy, carceral pedagogy technology industrial complex, right? With the monitoring tools that we know are racialized and racist, and just the fact that if I'm spending $9 a seat per kid for this monitoring tool to either monitor their writing, or the fact that they're sitting there and staring at the monitor is also kind of ableist, right? In a lot of ways, that what does it mean when we're investing in that and ignoring the pedagogy behind it, or not investing in the pedagogy, which, I mean, this is like an old thing that's been going on for a real long time, that it seems like we had an opening and did a little bit better. But I mean, I still go back to not that long ago, we had those, you have to have your camera on policies, right? I mean, there are schools that were doing that, right? And that was the norm.
Yeah, I'll be really curious to see that now, you know, the feast materials that we designed was designed for kids that don't really have access to good internet, right? So it's stuff that they could take home and work on at home without a lot of teacher interaction, interacting with the community, elders, aunties. And now that teachers are getting these materials in their hands, I'm really curious to see how it's going to be used, because we now, you know, we're kind of towards the end of COVID. And, you know, do we trust kids to go off and learn things on their own and then check in with us, and rather than just be sitting like the Hollywood squares staring at us on the screen? I don't know. I mean, I would hope so.
Well, and the other, sorry, go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, I mean, our kids going to be taking that up because they're so used to being coerced, you know, so will they do things if you don't coerce them?
Yeah, I was going to go back to your point, Karen, about, you know, the positive side of things like Jamboards and Pear Decks, where now we can collect very large amounts of data in anonymous ways or not anonymous ways, right? In ways that are more inclusive and allow students to participate in more meaningful ways, and thinking about those things and carrying them on. Karen, Johanna, do you want to speak to that?
I'm sorry, I'd gotten an email that took my attention away.
You were mentioning in the chat about Jamboard, right?
Yeah, so we some of my teachers asked for, you know, they wanted some different assessments, but not like end of the year assessment, or end of module assessments. And so we came up with some that were connected to our curriculum. Then we came up with some general things, like 3-2-1, just different ones that all of my teachers could use, K-5. And they were through Nearpod, the Google form, so that they can make it their own and make it. And it was actually a pretty good, result. I got a lot of good feedback on that. And they used it. I could tell that they were using our Nearpod because science was number 2 in the district behind math. Thank you very much. And with the other things that we used, but then, and so they used it how they needed it and all that. And it was really nice. If you wanted to use it in your classroom, great. It's there for you. If not, that's fine too. You get to make those decisions. Well, principals liked it. There was feedback, all this good stuff. And so so that turned into, hey, we got a great idea, Pullen. Why don't you make end of module assessments? End of year assessments for 3, 4, 5. And that's not the same. That's not something where, the kids, where they can speak their answers in Nearpod and draw, or they could do screenshots, or they could record a little video and submit it like in working groups. That's not the same as using the district platform for all the assessments. That's not the same. And so, but it got done. And the same team who worked with the fun stuff, I was able to pay them to do the not so fun stuff. And so hopefully we can do a little bit better though next year. And that's something I'm going to be working on. Exactly how and those tools give you so many ways you can do it. I'm sure Johanna or somebody else can share with that.
I guess I'm still stuck where we have a large percentage of students, especially on like the Big Island where it's more rural, where they just don't have access. So there's a huge equity issue for me. Technology is fantastic and we can do all these things, but what if like 20-something% of the kids can't access it?
In the classroom?
Well, in the classroom, yeah, I guess that's different. I'm talking about the remote more so than the classroom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we were in person, so that is different. I see what you're saying.
Johanna, you were going to say something.
I'm just vibing. I'm nodding a lot. And this is what I'm thinking about. I'm trying to figure, I used to be standards based, and I'm really thinking how I can create time. And so they would do assessments on Fridays. And what I want to turn this in is to have these reflection growth questions and these show me what you know times where they pick some of the things that we've been working on. And then it's just there. And we're kind of quiet, like we pick kind of a level of volume, and students are helping each other. They're making a video if they want. They can have some if they want to do some problems to show some things, that's fine too. But I'm really thinking about how I can make this chunk of time that is just students creating and just picking how they want to show me what they've done with that time. And but Jamboard, I do have to rep Jamboard for less of the individualized stuff, but to really create that community. When we were full virtual until March, having that and always going back to the Jamboard and updating it just blew my mind. I love that thing.
Have you noticed how much it has improved this year? It is so much better.
And I think to y'all's point, go ahead, Elisa.
I was just thinking that I think it's interesting, like we all talk about like these tools and using them to engage learners and process, because then we know they're going to bring what they have to the table and then remember more and learn more and, honor student choice and background and all that. But like Kay Renee said, sometimes I find that people above me that they think of assessment, even if they say formative, they're really thinking summative end game assessment. And they're not thinking at all that it will actually demonstrate what kids know or it will inform instruction. Because once we do those end of the year assessments like that, teachers rarely go back and look at them and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have taught that, or at all, right? So that's sort of the great divide. We are now officially one-to-one. We never were. Like when we were choosing our curriculum, we couldn't really look at like amplified because we weren't one-to-one, right? So COVID forced us into being one-to-one. Now, whether all the teachers use the technology that's available or know how to use the Jamboard, we still have gaps there. But I agree with what Joanna said. I think people are more aware. Like, I loved it when teachers would go, I didn't think Ben knew anything, but he is totally, thrived in the online environment. Like, I love when teachers see people in a different light. And even when I went to flexible seating in like 2014, I was teaching first grade, and some parents would say to me, I wanted Johnny to have a desk. I told him in kindergarten he'd have a desk. And then what you would usually work is I'd say, like, do you go out to eat with your husband? Yeah. Like, do you like a booth or a high top or a corner table? And they're like, well, yeah, and they'll go like, well, my husband always wants a high top. I go, see, that's what flexible seating is. And then they would just kind of go, oh, because that's what choice is. Like, as a grown-up, you don't want to be policed, right? You want to have choice. And that's what we're more democratic when we give these opportunities for choice, And so I think, like, somebody wrote in the chat, like, how do you honor the funds of knowledge? Like, for me, I'm really into outdoor learning, and I find that with kids, and I remember Lori's presentation, but when you do something outside or with gardens, it's very easy to see that kids come with everything. High school kids in a garden, people know stuff about outside because they go to a park or they walk or whatever. They're a city kid. They notice the worms in the sidewalk or the grass grows in cracks, And I think it's a great way to show teachers that when you start something outside, that the funds of knowledge is really obvious. So get it obvious there and then bring it inside and think about chemistry. Like, what do you know? And there's just so much work to do. And I think these forums where we can all be from different spots talking to each other, that's the best way, I think, to help each other keep the good work going,
I've been thinking a lot about parents. Oh, you go, Wanda. I've talked a lot.
I was gonna go back to your point about being an evangelist, Joanna. Since leaving the classroom, one of the first things I did was learn about disciplinary literacy essentials here in Michigan. And it goes the whole range of K through 12. So if you implement these disciplinary literacy essentials, that will help the students with their literacy. And so what really made me curious was too, how to get students to read more complex text. And that had me going down a rabbit hole. And I came up with the idea of inquiry charts and using that anchor text. And then I saw be an evangelist for Missouri, University of Missouri, which I also talked about. They already have text sets out there. They have different themes, so you can create your own text sets by using the resources that they have. So what's really important to me is the teacher has so much power. And if the teacher has the routines down, they have that content knowledge where they can get the information over to the students, then you can like bypass the systems because we see how the systems malfunction. So if you can get your teachers on board, they know these principles and they enact them to the best of their ability. I just feel that's where the true power is. The closer you are to the classroom, the better off we're gonna be.
Just like I thought, the time flew by. Parting thoughts.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me. This has been a great group to get to know these people and to hear about all the different things that are happening. And this is a great idea. Thanks.
Absolutely.
You've talked, Doran, a few times about the brilliance of students, brilliance of teachers. And the one thing, like there's going to be a lot this year, next year, that we can take to task and be angry about. And, just things are going to frost our butts. But there, I also want to, and I think Doran, even on Twitter, you've tried to remind me a couple of times that there is hope and there is promise. Our kids have things that should be celebrated. They have genius, and we need to begin from a place of joy. And so we are going to be post-pandemic. We have an opportunity to teach kids so that they can understand science and understand mathematics and numbers better. So if anything like that happens again, they can process it differently, hopefully. And so I want us to also think that we have humans who have experienced some serious crap, both students and adults, including our leaders, our teachers, our paraprofessionals. And so leading with that kindness, leading with grace, leading with joy, and remembering that they all deserve the absolute best. And so like, I'm excited. Lori is going to be in the class and, doing research in fifth graders herself. Like, that's exciting to me. And so thinking of the things that give me hope, that make me feel like our profession is going to keep on going because we got people like y'all. And so that's just something that I'm very grateful I was able to hear today, even a retiree who's still putting in the work. So that's where I am.
I see be brave, brilliant, and compassionate. And I would just add to that, carry out your own inquiries. I think teachers do that by nature anyway. But when you try out new things, your question, what happens when I do X? Try it out, see what happens, and then tweak it.
Yeah, I think the one thing that helped me do that as a teacher is really seeking out like PD opportunities beyond your school district, because your school district may think that they know what you need, but they don't always.
I just like to put up little notes to remind myself of things. So thanks for being here, everyone. I really enjoyed hearing from all of you.
Yes, thank you. And tell us about next year, right? Like, keep us in the loop.
Go ahead, Lori.
Oh, well, I'll be tweeting about 5th grade, so
Okay.
stay tuned.
Yeah, I know I followed Wanda and Kay Renee after it, but I don't think I have your Twitter, Lori, and I don't have Doran's Twitter, and maybe put them all in the chat and then I'll just take a picture of them if I. Thank goodness for cameras, right?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all. I know, like, I remember now, it seems like a lifetime ago when I sent an email to educators from across this country, just because in late fall, it was like, we got to do something because this year is not going to go well. And you all agreed to do this during a very chaotic time. And kind of like you're saying, Kay Renee, COVID has been miserable, but there are also some things that came out, and Johanna, I appreciated your point about community. And I can speak for myself. Often I don't have the local community to do the work that needs to be done or to find the support for the work that needs to be done, because some of this isn't being done by very many people. I think where any of us are at, and more than anything, I really appreciated you all's commitment, community, and willingness to be part of this. And I didn't particularly have much of a vision going forward, but now I almost feel like it seems like there's got to be episode 2.0 of this sometime down the road. So I might send some emails and see if we can continue this conversation or expand this conversation in some way, because I think it's been so valuable. And lastly, I want to say that I've heard not just from folks who attended these sessions, but also folks who watched these sessions of how much they've learned, how inspiring, and how it has helped them change their approaches to teaching. So know that the impact has been felt, and there have been lots of conversations about ungrading, place-based learning and how we might do that, learning about attending to all of our students and our linguistically diverse students, and how do we bring literacy into the classroom. So the impact I think is being felt and will continue to reverberate. So I'm really, really grateful that you all agreed to be part of this and shared your brilliance with us. So thank you all very much.